Without further ado, I would love to introduce you all. Most of you know Rob and Shannon. They're great friends of mine. They've bent over backwards. If you know them, if you've known them, if you know their story at all, they've been over backwards for you. They do everything they can to try to help you. And they have become business owners of Exit Realty in Birmingham. And they've just absolutely, I've watched them go from taking this place that was nothing to expanding it and now having so many agents and just serving so many people in the community. And I'm super proud of y'all. So please give a big welcome and a big hand to Robert and Shannon Malcom. And we got some tech that we're going to...
Nice.
Here, you take this while Shannon hooks up the...
Is this one work?
You don't need to do that.
That's for
the audio for that.
Okay. What are we doing? We're hooking up the...
I'm getting out of the way. Y'all do what you do.
I don't even know what we're doing.
Yes, you do.
So before we get going, does anybody in the room ever felt like some of your past decisions have either hindered you from making your dreams or even stopped you from getting your dreams? Does anybody in the room relate to that? Sweet. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. A lot of what we're going to talk about tonight is mindset, how Shannon and I went from making these awful decisions in life.
Just keep talking.
Yeah. And how that changed to where we're able to run multiple companies. Do magic tricks. It's going to be fine.
It is.
It was working a second ago.
Yeah.
So what we've done is over this past year is we've taken our life and our stories and how we've weaved it through and used real estate in the middle of how that actually, with a bunch of other magic, changed the direction of where we were going and changed the whole course of our lives, right? And so, are we going to go without slides?
We're going to go without
slides. We're going to
slides.
wing this tonight, people.
It's not that hard.
Yeah.
We know our story.
Okay. So, over the last, 9 months, we've been writing a book. And to get that, I want to talk to you guys really about some of the process, I guess, before we get into the story, right? So the process for us was we started out, we're going to write a book. We're not going to write a book. We're going to write a book. We're not going to write. Hey, Shannon, have you started? Yes. And then I would write 10 pages and then I lost the notebook, right? And so I know a lot of you guys have probably had similar journeys, right? Hey, this is super important. And then you set it down and then you can't find it. So we decided that we needed some help, okay? And I went to a couple of different events and found a friend from my past. He's here in the room, Andrew Jenkins, and he is our ghostwriter of this book, right? And so the process for that is so much different than I thought writing a book was. The process involved me first meeting Andrew for several hours and just telling stories. And that's what I'm good at. I love it. If any of you guys know me, I'm always, hey, this one time, right?
And some of them are true.
And some of them are true, right? So that part was fun for me. And so we sat down for hours and he would tell me, hey, make sure that whatever the first stories that come to mind are probably the ones that are going to end up going in the book, because those are the ones that people would relate to or whatever. You don't really have to dig deep and go, oh, what was I doing in the 6th grade, right? That kind of stuff for this type of book wasn't super important. So I went and met him and shared story after story after story. And to be honest, I knew him at some point, and we'll talk about that in our past. But some of the stuff I was like, all right, this is important. And it's super embarrassing, right? And I told it anyway because of what we're trying to do in this book. And the whole thing is, our book is a 7-part series to help you get where you are to where you are designed to be, right? And we've got our story woven through the middle of it, and we know that everyone can relate. Not everyone has stupid, just wild, crazy stories that I have like in Japan, and I'll tell you all about some of that stuff and some of the crazy stuff that happened to Shannon when she was young. But you can still relate on some level, right? And so that's the hope that we have for this book. So I went and shared my stories, and then Shannon went and shared her stories, and then we had to go back and share a few more, and then the process got started.
You're doing great, babe. Keep going.
So, and I don't want to say like at that point I was like, okay, you got me a ghostwriter, because no, that's not how it works, right? So a little bit, he's a genius at what he does, and he's a genius at being able to take our voices and put it on paper, because the hardest part for me was to translate the stories that I had here into how can I help someone with my story? Like, this story's funny and this story is ridiculous, but how can I use that story to help someone, right? And genius about taking that story, putting it on paper to be able to help people. So he gets to writing, and then I don't know, it took a while, and we get a stack of paper about this big, and it didn't feel like a book, and it was weird, right? And you're flipping regular paper, and you're going, it didn't feel right. Like I needed that book in my hand. But that was the first part for us to go, okay, you misheard this story, or hey, this is way out of line. You took a little liberty here, right? Like, and so we had to rein some of that stuff back in, and then some of that we're like, yeah, you're really gonna have to give a little more here for people to actually understand what's going on. So, hey, anyway, I can wrap it up. Everybody's clapping like what I'm saying is not important. What? I'm just kidding. So, let me wrap this part of this part up.
You're doing great.
We had it on paper, and we scratched and made some edits, and we gave it back, and then it came back, and we made a few more edits, and then we got this book. And it was fun. It was real when we saw the book. And I got to tell y'all, I all of a sudden started making stories in my head. Okay? I'm looking at a book that I've wrote, and I'm going to tell y'all, if you get this book and look at it and actually read it, you'll see why. There's some stuff that I did in my past that I'm embarrassed about, but I put it in this book because I really feel like it'll help other people get where they're designed to go. So I started getting stories in my head like, people gonna think you a fool. People gonna know you're a fraud, Rob. You're exposing yourself, right? And it was our enemy that didn't want our story and our light to come out, right? And we know we have common enemies, right? And it was extremely hard when I actually saw the book with the cover. I get chill bumps thinking about it. For me to say, okay, let's move forward. It really was. And so we sat down. We made edits 3 times, 4 times. We made a lot of edits back and forth, and it eventually came to what you guys see tonight. And we are so excited to really just kind of have a family atmosphere where we can tell some of our story, and we're going to tell stories from the book, and we're going to use some of these pictures to help me, because, I think Brian Cloud asked me if I had any colors for my coloring book, right? Like I'm a prior Marine. I eat crayons. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, I need these pictures to help me be able to do what we're going to do. So thank God my beautiful bride got that work.
Because last time we tried a presentation with words, that didn't work for him. So tonight we're doing pictures.
We're doing pictures. You guys already know what you're in for. Did you start this part?
So I do want to kind of piggyback off Rob talking about the stories that we create in our head. So for years and years and years, we've been told that we ought to write a book because we've shared some pretty insane stories of our past. And there was always a hesitation. And for me, it was because of the people in my past. I was afraid that they would figure out where I am now and
chase me down
or come back into my life, and I didn't want that for myself or my family. And so enough time has gone by, and the Lord finally just said, okay, it's time. And those people are no longer a concern. So it's time. So we just really, I know Brian talked about, we're going to train you. If you listen to what we're going to talk about tonight, the training is going to be what not to do, because we did a lot of things that we should not have done, but everything that we have done has led us to this point. And so, you know, people say, would you change your story if you could? And I wouldn't, because I wouldn't be where I am today had I not survived all the things I survived and overcame and gained some wisdom on how to live this life, right? So, Rob, I want you to...
Our story. So, this book is written, and y'all will see, in a story from me, and then a story from Shannon, then a story from me, and a story from Shannon. And it doesn't go like, I was born in 1971 in Birmingham, Alabama, Brookwood Hospital. Okay? It's not that. It starts in about my 30s and then bounces around. If you guys have ever remember that movie Pulp Fiction, how it bounces around, we kind of wrote this book like that. Okay? One, because it's more fun. Two, when you hear some of our lifestyle, you'll understand we can't remember everything in order, right? We just can't.
There are a lot of missing pieces of our life.
There's a couple missing pieces in there. So, because it's my story and her story, it's fair to say, like, we started out in two completely separate, opposite type of families. And I'm going to tell, for mine, I grew up in a beautiful family. I grew up in what, if you guys remember the Brady Bunch, I mean, almost perfect, right? Like, I had a brother and a sister and a mom and a dad that stayed married until my mom got so sick with Alzheimer's that she passed away, right? They stayed together no matter what was going on with them. I grew up in a family where if there was an issue or a problem, we addressed it right then and we grew from it, okay? I grew up in a family that loved each other, and we told each other all the time, I love you. I love you. Oh, I love you. I mean, we did. And it was so funny. My mom would be like 16. I know you love me, Mom. You told me 10 million times, right? Like, she would tell me she loved me. My dad would tell me. And then I was this kid that was born with epilepsy. Okay, and I had these seizures that caused me to just pass out at the dinner table or whatnot. And the doctors told my parents that I would never be able to drive a car. I'd never be able to really function in front of other people and whatnot. Unless, praise the Lord, I don't have those things anymore and I beat the odds, right? But we pushed through that. And because I had stuff like that, my parents constantly told me and my brother and my sister, Abby Gore, right here on the 1, 2, 3, 4th row on the left side. My mom constantly told us, you can do whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter. Whatever you decide to do, you're going to be able to do it. And she instilled this stuff in us, and it made us free. Like, I thought I was Superman. Y'all can see I'm 53 years old. I'm 5'5", right? And I was thinking I'm a titan when I was growing up, right? I can do anything. I'm the president of the United States. Anyway, that paints this picture. This is a family that I grew up in. Very loving, very family-oriented. I spent enough time on
but you were rebellious. And so you got into drugs and alcohol.
Okay, good point. So,
oh yeah, that part.
Good point. And without giving the war stories, right? I started drinking about 12 years old. I started smoking marijuana around that same time too, and then I was taking a daily dose of acid and mushrooms before 10th grade. So 9th grade, I had a daily dose of either mushrooms or acid every day. Super artistic.
He does draw some pretty funky stuff.
Yeah. And I don't know, there was something in my head that just, no matter, even though I came from an absolute, just what most people would say, just the absolute box of perfect family, I chose to go against the grain. I made awful decisions starting at 12, and I started to pay for it later in life. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I was not born into that family. I was born into a family who was super poor. We were homeless when I was a kid, when I was just a little kid. And we were the kind of poor that, you know, we were Toys for Tots kids. And some of y'all are old enough in the room to know what that is. For those that are not, that's government-assisted Christmas presents for your kids that you can't buy the toys for. And I got a lot of footballs, even though I'm a female. I didn't get the Barbie dolls. But we moved all the time because we either couldn't pay the rent or, you know, many reasons why. But my mom and my dad, they separated when I was pretty young, and my dad actually was killed in a drunk driving accident. He had his own addictions and was an alcoholic. He did 2 tours in Vietnam, stepped near a landmine, had shrapnel in his body. So to deal with the pain, he numbed it with drugs and alcohol. Well, I was 9 years old when he died. And when he died, I became fair game to all the other men in my mom's life, because there was no one there to protect me. So I went through childhood molestation. I went through a teenage rape. I had a mom who excused the men's behavior and said, oh, they just didn't know it was you. They were drinking. And I'm like, I'm 11. So a lot of times I bounced back and forth to my great-grandmother's house, and she made sure that I went to church. And so I had a little bit of a foundation of scripture and of knowing the Lord. But when all of those things started happening to me, all I could think was that all those stories were lies, that the song I learned to sing in front of the church, Jesus Loves Little Children, was a lie. And so I became very angry at God and at my life. And so I started drinking and drugging 12, 13 years old. Ended up dropping out of high school, getting pregnant, married the guy that got me pregnant, who was about 7 years older than me. And he was a bum. And that is a true sentence out of the book. Kenny is a bum. I hope he reads it. He's the father of both of my children. But he forgot to quit dating when we got married. So that seemed to be a pattern in my life. That was a normalcy for me, for the men to cheat on the women and for the men to beat the women up. And so even though as a little girl I said, I'm never going to be my mom, I'm going to do better for my children, I didn't. I ended up following right in her footsteps, choosing the same guy with just a different face and a different name. My addictions got pretty bad. When I finally got away from their dad, I was introduced to cocaine and methamphetamines, and those became my drugs of choice. I was super mom. I held a job always, and always had a really good work ethic, and I don't know where that came from because nobody else in my family had a good work ethic. But by the time Rob and I were introduced to each other in 2005, he and I both were on a path of destruction.
Yeah, so my roommate at the time, also knew Shannon, and he told Shannon one night, hey, I want you to meet my friend because y'all can either
save each other, or at least I know my friends won't die alone.
He knew we were both on just this path of destruction. And the best way to paint the picture of where Shannon and I were when we met is both of us had found rock bottom. Like, when you can picture just the worst stuff, that's where we were. But when we got together, we're like, let's go rent a jackhammer. Let's go a little lower.
So I had just left my second husband, who was Satan himself. He was very much paranoid schizophrenic from the drug addictions that we had, and he tormented me and my children. And I thought the only way I would get away from him was to either die myself, either he would kill me, or I would have to kill him to escape him. So I walked out on my children. I left my children with my mom and my older sister for them to raise. And I was going to go off to try to drink and drug myself to death because I was done. I was done surviving life.
Like, honestly, right before Shannon met me, she had been beat up pretty bad, and to escape she had to jump. This is in the book, but she had to jump out of a truck that was driving like 50 miles an hour down the highway
I shouldn't be here.
Yeah, I mean, that we're skipping some of this stuff because we want you to, but you know, you need to know, like, she was living an absolute crazy life right before she met me.
Before I met the Tasmanian devil.
Right.
This ended up being our home. We lived in this Mitsubishi Eclipse in the Target parking lot out on 280. And the little, $10 an hour security cop, when he would come through and do his nightly checks, we would just pull all of our clothes over on the top of us. And so he just saw an empty car full of crap, right? But we ended up partying together for a couple of years before we ended up finding ourselves in legal troubles. We both got really sloppy because we really didn't care anymore. We didn't care at all. I had already given myself an expiration date of 35 years old, which happens to also be the age my dad was when he died. And so in my head, I had no plan for a future. If you asked me what I wanted to be, it was nothing because I could not see or visualize anything past that time.
So to put into perspective how sloppy we were at that time, Shannon was staying in some little apartments out in Bibb County, and I went to visit her, and I was looking through her little rubber band of money and whatnot, and I was like, Shannon, your license is Texas. We need to get you an Alabama license. And she said, okay, well, I was like, look, I'm going to pick you up in the morning, and we're going to go down to the state trooper's office and get you a license. Well, yeah. So I show up at her house at like 8 in the morning with some tall boys, and we're pounding tall boys with this plan to go to the state trooper's office.
We made smart decisions.
Okay.
Well, funny thing is when Rob gets ready to pass out or if he gets bored or sits still for too long, he usually strips down to his boxers and just passes out. It doesn't matter where he's at. So okay. 6-pack of tall boys in.
Yeah. So we end up at the at the state trooper's office. Well, for whatever reason, I had a little bit of a buzz from the day before still, and we're having these tall boys, and we missed the one we were going to. So I was like, we're closer to Tuscaloosa. Let's just go to Tuscaloosa. So we whip in. We're way away from where we live at this point. And Shannon gets brave and shoots a mouthwash and goes into the DMV.
I'm standing in a line.
Meanwhile, I'm in the back seat of our house in my boxer shorts, taking a little nap. Okay? It might take a while. So
female officer inside walks up and she's like, hey, ma'am, have you been drinking? And I was like, no, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. Who drinks at 8 o'clock in the morning? She's like, ma'am, you smell of alcohol.
The whole DMV smelled like alcohol.
And I was like, well, maybe I've had a couple. And she's like, yeah, who brought you here? And I'm like, oh, my boyfriend's out in the car. She's like, well, we're not getting whatever you're here to get today. In fact, I need to go see your boyfriend and see if he's okay to drive you out. And I'm like, cool. So I lead her out, and
she's only been in there for 10 minutes. Like, it hasn't been like an hour.
I haven't been there very long.
It's not like it's been an hour.
I'm walking, looking at the car, and I'm like, oh, crap. He's in the backseat, passed out. Well, she takes the keys, and she says she's not going to let us leave until I find a valid Alabama licensed driver. So there's a Exxon, Express Oil Change,
Express Oil.
Couple of miles, a couple of blocks down the road. So I just walked in there and was like, damsel in distress, I need somebody's help. And this kid is like, yeah, what you got? I'm like, hey, I'll buy you a 6-pack if you'll just come drive my car out of the state trooper's office. And he's like, cool. And so, it's 8:30 in the morning by now. Who doesn't want a 6-pack? But he walks back up there with me. He's able to drive me off the lot. I tell him to pull into the store. And I'm like, hey, go on in and pick what you want. Let me just get some money. And as soon as I saw him get to the cooler, I drove off because no good deed goes unpunished, right?
Unpunished. Thank you, sir.
So anyway, needless to say, because of those kinds of smart decisions that we were making, really good life planning activities, we ended up getting arrested a couple of times. But the last time we got arrested, I ended up residing in Shelby County Jail for several months while Rob ended up being reconnected with his dad and ended up starting to stay with his dad.
So when we were getting booked, it might not have been in this one, but we were getting booked, and Shannon's like, Oh God. No, they had taken us in a paddy wagon, so it wasn't like they hadn't split us up into men and women yet. We were just both coming out of the same vehicle, and she goes, "Oh my God." And I'm like, "What?" She reaches in her bra and pulls out, and we had an 8 ball of cocaine, and we're getting booked. And that's 3.5 grams. And
This is after I took myself out of my handcuffs.
This is after Shannon took herself out of her handcuff. I'm like,
I put them back on.
Give it to me. So I'm holding this thing, and I'm like, what in the hell am I going to do with this cocaine in the cop station? And this guy is...
Little inmate guy.
He's an inmate guy, he's sweeping, and I was like... And he looked, and I went... And he went...
He was gone.
I'm done, boss, right? And went on back. I mean... That's the sloppy kind of stuff that Shannon and I were doing back in these days when we were living in the car. Like, none of that made sense. If you just think that's funny and we can laugh about it, but think about this. This doesn't even make sense.
But like, that was life and that was normal for us. But getting arrested that last time, I ended up sitting in Shelby County Jail for several months before Rob ended up being able to wear the bondsman woman down so that she would post bail for me.
I called her every single day. Every day. And the answer was no, every day. And it was 3 months. I called her every single day. Finally, fine, Mr. Malcom, let's go get your girlfriend.
Needless to say, he also convinced my mom into coming in and getting me out. But I want you guys to know, and you'll read it in the book, I was in jail on my son's 16th birthday. And I was about to miss my daughter's 13th birthday. And those are 2 pretty big birthdays for kids, right? My kids and my family were used to not hearing from me for weeks and months at a time. And even though I tried to call her from the jail, she would never pick up the phone because she didn't want the kids to know that I was in jail. But when Rob finally got me out, we were able to stay at his dad's and then later moved in with Matt and Abby, his sister and brother-in-law. And we just kind of started this road to recovery. We didn't stay together as a boyfriend and girlfriend. We stayed really good friends. But he started working at a ministry, helping men come out of prison. And I had gotten a couple of jobs helping. I worked for Bradford Health Services, which was a pretty dumb idea because I was so newly clean that I was pretty impressionable. And so as I'm putting people in rehab, I'm also, relapsing. But I relapsed in January of 2011 and hooked up with a guy who was just like all the men I ever chose in my life. And he beat me up pretty bad, broke my nose, cracked a couple of ribs. And that was the first time I ever went to the hospital for any medical issue at all. Like, I just refused. Even when I jumped out of the truck, I refused to go to the hospital. And I laid dying for about 3 days, bleeding from my head that was split open. But I went to the hospital, and that was the first time in my life that I realized that women getting beat up was frowned upon because the doctors and the nurses were like, who has done this to you? And you can't leave unless you tell us who did it, or you're going to go to a safe house so that we know you're protected. And I'm like, holy crap. You mean this isn't okay? This is just a broke nose and a couple of ribs. I'm good. But I ended up calling Rob, and he came and got me, and I actually moved into his boss's house. And shortly after that, just probably within a couple of months, Rob got shot in a drive-by, and that story is chapter 1 in the book. And so he gives great detail on that. But just to tell you how Rob's life flashed before his eyes, he was shot in June.
Yeah.
He
so
proposed.
Let me talk about that for a second. So we talk about it in the book, but this is really important. Like, for me, I get shot, and y'all will read the story in the book, but immediately it's like they say in the movies. It really is like all these stories just are going, and it's so much regret and so many things that I was like, I should have finished that conversation. I should have told my dad I'm sorry. I should have asked Shannon to marry me, right? And it's real. And I get chill bumps thinking about it because it's so real. And the deal is, guys, we walk around every day with all this stuff untied. Like, it made me realize I have to live every single day with my account super short because you never know. You never know what's going to happen, right? And we paint a really good picture of that in the book, but I thought it was important to say that tonight. Like, all of us, we just take for granted that we'll have tomorrow.
Right.
And when that happened, it changed my perspective on, man, what's important? What's important to me? Is it this day-to-day stuff? My coach calls it sawing sawdust. This doesn't really matter, but I'm busy. I'm busier than everybody else. Check me out on Instagram. Boom, grinding, right? Is any of that important? It really put me in perspective at that time. I'm a grinder. I love work. But I started going, wow, all these people have told me that I need to marry Shannon, and I've laughed it off for years.
Because he wasn't my type. I always told him he's not my type. I don't want to marry him.
Look, I get shot in June. I proposed to her in August. I thought about it like this. I'm like, it's done. I have to do this. I have to do
And then we got married October 1st. So that's how fast Rob moves. But
yeah.
But here's the thing. I'm Rob's first wife. Rob is not my first husband. And I didn't know what a healthy relationship looked like. So I did end up leaving Rob within our first year of marriage. And that story's in the book as well. And that was a really dark time for Rob. But when I came back, he had already started 3D Properties.
Yeah. So let's talk about 3D Properties, right? 3D, people are like, what does 3D stand for? It's like decorum, three-dimensional. No, it's 3 dogs. Like,
super original, right?
My business partner and I were sitting around this table, and we were trying to think of something that made us sound smart. And both of us are 2 Marines, right? So we're like, man, we came up with all these. And Shannon was there, and she's like, that name is stupid. Okay?
They had a lot of stupid names.
And then we come up with another one. You are ridiculous. And I mean, we came up with all these names. And then finally, I was like, we had Andre and Reno and Molly, and we had just recently got them. Like, they were still 8 weeks old. We're like, what if we name our company 3D and they're the Godfathers? 3
So
dogs.
now y'all know his secret behind 3D Properties.
3 dogs. It has nothing to do with work or anything. It's just 3 dogs.
So Rob bought a $4,000 house, and that's the house we moved into when we got married.
Okay, stop. $4,000 I paid for this house. It was a $4,000 house.
It was. We pulled the blinds out of one window on this wall, and the whole wall hit the grass. It was
Boom!
It was a $4,000 house. But he kind of made the bedroom a livable room and somewhat of a kitchen.
And a bathroom.
But I worked back then at a medical facility, and so I had dress clothes on every single day. And by the time I got from the bedroom to the front door, I was covered in sheetrock dust. So I was not happy. But left him, ended up coming back because of the way he handled the time while I was away. He didn't do like all the other men in my life did. He didn't throw my clothes in the yard. He didn't burn them. He didn't cuss me.
So, and I think that goes back to my upbringing, what I talked about at the very beginning, right? So I have recently been shot, and I've recently thought, okay, God brought me this woman to be my wife. I'm supposed to be married to this woman, and she leaves. And I got to tell you guys, I was on this high, and it was so low. I'm like a fresh Christian, and I'm like, God brought me this woman. Why? Where is she? It was awful. So I went to my dad, and I told him what was going on, and he said, listen, this is some of the best advice I ever got. You need to protect your wife. You don't go around talking to anybody about that she's gone. You never say a negative thing about her. You talk only positive, and if people know she's gone, just turn it around and talk positive about your wife. When, and he kept saying when, not if. When she comes back, you have protected her so that she can live a good life. And guys, think about like when people make us mad and we just go straight to Facebook. This mother effer. You know what I mean? Like,
he didn't call me any of those names.
No. Sorry, it makes me tear up a little bit, but it allowed Shannon a safe place to land. and it was different. And when she came back, it was so different. She didn't know how to react. She thought that I was going to be punching her, you know what I mean? Like all her other husbands.
I even baited him, guys. I, to be completely honest, have probably swung and hit Rob more times than we could count. And he never retaliates, even when I bait him.
Sorry, I thought it was important. It just goes back to how I was raised, and some really, really good advice. Even though I had lived this bad, I still could take and listen to people.
So this house just happened to be on Caraway Boulevard, and Rob started really falling in love with that neighborhood. We both did. And so we started working on flipping a lot of the houses in the Norwood community. This is my favorite transformation. I put just my favorites in here, but these are just some of the houses that he restored. And what I think for us, like taking these houses that look like this and making them come back to life, was a true representation of our life, because we were that for so long. And it was just awesome to see the transformation at every step. And it was a clear line to our life, that God was transforming us and was bringing us back into beauty, right? Beauty from ashes.
And not only just the houses, but we were able to do a neighborhood that a lot of people in Birmingham had forgotten. And, you know, I mean, whatever political side of that you feel, but I mean, it was a neighborhood that had gone like this, a whole neighborhood. And so we've done 53 houses in there. Look at this one.
So we bought this house, and I fell in love with it because if you stand in this window, you have the most beautiful sunset. And so I begged Rob for us to keep this and build it for ourselves. And so we did. And so now we have this beautiful house that I call the Malcom Mansion, even though it's not a mansion, it is to me. But through the restoration of our lives, the Lord has also restored our families. And so my mom actually lives in our house with us. I take care of her now. She's a little bit older.
That's full circle.
Full circle. But when I talk about families restored.
Go back one. Okay. So right where that green is on that front corner, before we pressure washed it, it said bitch in big letters, like somebody sprayed it. And Shannon shows this picture, like we're all excited, we've bought this house, we're going to make it our home. And she shows it to her friend, and her friend goes, how did they know you were going to buy it?
Full circle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was. Yeah. Yeah, no. So, you know, Rob and I just celebrated our 13th wedding anniversary, which means that I've been clean a little over 13 years because I relapsed early. Thank you. But I look at these pictures, and this might make me cry. I look at these pictures and I think that if I had had my way, look what I would have missed. I would have missed my grown kids. This is my son and his beautiful wife and my daughter, but that's our granddaughter. Yeah. I got to be there the day she was born, and I have been to see her sometimes more than once a quarter, but that's in my business plan, that I go see my granddaughter once a quarter. And that goes on my calendar first, before our trips, before work stuff, because I think of how different their lives would have been had I killed myself like I was trying to. But I think about all that I would have missed. And then you've got Rob's family that's ginormous, and people just come from every state. And I'm part of their family now. And I feel just as loved by Abby and by Rob's family as I do my own family. This is Rob's favorite picture because our 3-year-old granddaughter has already learned his point.
She's already got my pose.
But when Rob started renovating Norwood, he asked me to get my real estate license, and I was against it because I thought you had to look and act a certain way to be a realtor. I thought you had to be billboard pretty.
I love
right?
that term.
And I didn't think I was billboard pretty, and so I didn't want to do that. But in true Rob fashion, he did wear me down, and
every single day.
And I got my real estate license. And the first company that I joined, funny enough, was Brick Realty with Gusty Goulis and the Bentley Drozdowicz team. So Gusty, thanks for being here. I learned so much from him in my first year, but the most important thing he told me back then was that the fortune's in the follow-up. And I thought that I was just going to sell real estate to help our family. But I ended up meeting a couple of buyer clients that had been shunned by realtors and dismissed because he didn't have a lot of money. But I remember what it felt to feel unworthy of somebody's time. And so I made it my mission to help as many lower income families as I could and to educate them on that they could become homeowners. My family always rented. This is the first home I've ever owned, right? This one that Rob and I live in Norwood. I was always a renter and I didn't know about home ownership.
And you're the only one on the mortgage.
I am the only one on the mortgage. That means you can go at any time. Through real estate, we were approached by Exit Realty, and they had heard a lot about us through just different people and thought we would be a good fit for them. And I turned them down multiple times, said I did not want to be an owner. I did not want to be a broker. I knew how hard it was from watching Gusty's struggles and some others. And I didn't want to do that. Like that was very weighty to me to think about being responsible for a lot of people. But I prayed about it, and the Lord kept giving me these things that I was using as bargaining chips. And so I finally said, okay, we're going to do this. And we've been open almost 4 years now. And this is our beautiful office. We have 48 agents, not counting ourselves. So we have an office of 50. And I couldn't do it without my best friend, Ebony, there, because she is our team mom. But Rob and I have gone on this journey, and we've been very successful in real estate, not only in flipping houses and in running a real estate brokerage, but we also have a lot of short-term rentals, and we use Joseph and Katina for all of our insurance needs. I call Katina all the time.
And we use my sister to manage the
Airbnbs
because I don't like taking the calls. I like checking the calendar and going, oh, we got 5 guests. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so right now, and it's not bragging, but we came from, y'all saw the car we were living in, right? Not too many years ago. And we have that beautiful White House, but we have 11 short-term rentals.
Yep.
And we have 2 office buildings that we own. One is just currently a warehouse, and the other one we're trying to lease out right now.
We started getting coaching a couple of years ago, and that has really made a huge difference in our life, because if you consistently stay in a room with people that are in your same playing field, you're never going to grow, right? And so like Brian suggests, get in the rooms. Get in the rooms with people who are doing the things that you want to do so that you can rise up. And so as we have just gone on this journey and was able to partner with Andrew and get this book written, really out of that birthed all of this desire to want to help people learn how to flip, how to introduce people to money, how to vet good contractors, because we do all know that there are a lot of bad contractors.
Can I interrupt for a second?
You can interrupt all the time.
Talking about getting in the room, I don't know how many years ago it was, but I was on Facebook. I couldn't sleep, and I was like, I saw something Brian Tripp put on Facebook, and I was like, I want to be in that mastermind group. I didn't even know what it was, right? So
Story of my life.
I looked him up. I'd never met him before, and I friended him and went private messages. Hey, man, I want to talk about that. He said, oh, we'd love to have you and your wife. And then I found out later, it was really, they would love to have my wife in that meeting, you know what I mean? But, man, she's really elevated me through this. But so important, like at that point in our time, I don't want to.
No, go ahead. You're good.
Skip over too much of that. Is it was so important for us to join a group, right? And Brian connected us with some super cool people. Bruce, right here on the front row. I can't stop staring at that shirt you're wearing. Hey, but man, I mean, it really took us from where we were to a whole nother level. And it was just about networking and being with other people that we didn't really know until we got in the room. And I know everybody, that's a buzzword, but and since then, Shannon and I have joined several coaching programs that have helped us take our business practices to a whole nother level. And so don't really want to skip on that in a room like this. It is so important. If you have big goals and big dreams, write them down and then find the people that can help you get there.
So for those of you that got the book there, and there's plenty more over there, we have several QR codes in there for different things that we've put together. Of course, Rob teaching people how to flip and how to get started in that, because he's very good at it. He's very good at what he does.
Ooh, thanks, baby.
And then just, that's your one compliment for today.
You are. I'll compliment you.
Thanks, Bruce. Thank you.
And then just through realizing that I have something to offer people and that people do look up to me, and that's still hard for me to accept sometimes. I've put together just some best practices and some things that I can do to help with your real estate career, to take you from where you are to set some really big goals and possibly even double what your current production is. Just having the right systems and processes that I've perfected over the years. And then through our coaching and through writing this book, we really were able to take it and separate it into 7 applications. And if you got the book and have flipped through it, you'll see that behind each part is some mindset coaching. And there's actual space in the book for you to like really dig deep. And your story may not be as traumatic as ours, but all of us have overcome adversity, and we've all had struggles somewhere, disappointments in our life. And so we ask just some thought-provoking questions in the book, and we leave you space to write in the book. So this book is supposed to be used as a tool. Like, read it, go through it, and then if you pick it up in a couple of years, I want you to celebrate how far you've come when you go back and look at how you answered the question today. Because if you really practice this mindset and get in the rooms and get around people who are doing what you want to do, you're going to elevate. And for Rob and I, it's always been that if one of us come up, we all want to come up. And so let's rise up together.
Bam. Is that us?
That's it.
Oh, we did it.